Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this event. Today, I'm delighted to welcome one of our community advisors, Caroline Schofield, to today's event. This is Caroline's first time on our live event, so welcome, Caroline. Thank you for joining us today. Caroline, as I said, is one of our community advisors and works within our support team on the advice line. Our advice line is our free advice and support service that we run through our Centre for Practice Innovation. So Caroline is going to join us today and talk a little bit about sleep and feeling rested and how important that is, particularly now when we're all sort of experiencing quite high levels of stress and anxiety in an ever-changing world because of the effects of COVID. But also we're aware, aren't we, Caroline, through sort of conversations with people through our advice line that sleep's becoming an issue for some people. Finding that right balance and feeling rested, I think, is really the kind of main focus that people are contacting us about. So Caroline is a trained sleep counsellor and provides lots of advice and support to a number of our individuals through the advice line. So Caroline, I suppose, as I said, we've had quite a few inquiries around sleep and asking for support around sleep. So I wonder if you could share with us, some insights from your perspective. What are the sort of things that people maybe want to consider when they're looking at a good sleep pattern and a good sleep routine?
I think in relation to sleep, I think it sounds like it's such a simple thing, it's such a natural thing, but I think from an experience on the advice line is that often for families, sleep is actually very, very complicated, and there are numerous issues that then fall from that. And we know that for sleep, it doesn't just affect the child or the adult, it also affects the whole family. So that's mums, dads, partners, siblings, grandparents even. So we know that the ripple effect is quite immense for many families. Sleep, although it sounds very simple, is actually quite complicated, and certainly when families contact the advice line, what we like to do is really to kind of discuss what the issues are, because it's not just a single thing. It normally sleep is part of other things as well. So we try to kind of take apart what the issues may be and try to make sense of the sleep issue and or looks like, and even that quite complicated as well.
I think that's a really important sort of point to sort of talk about, isn't it? That I suppose a lot of us are in a fortunate position when we maybe take our sleep for granted, and actually, sleep is a really complicated thing. Being able to feel that you're ready for sleep and to get that restful, good quality sleep. And throughout December here at Scottish Autism, we'll focus on well-being, and sleep's a really important part of that, or at least feeling rested, feeling like you've been able to recharge and refocus. And it sounds simple, but for a lot of families it isn't, is it? So we often talk about a good sleep routine. I suppose as a parent or as an individual, how might you go about sort of establishing that routine? What's the best way to start with that?
I think the important thing is to consider that sleep doesn't just start just at bedtime. I think what you have to do is look at almost the kind of whole day and kind of start to look at, well, what happens, for example, if the child's at school, if it's school age, what happens when the child comes home from school? What happens at dinner time? What's process that then happens to indicate and to tell everybody that it's time for getting ready for bed? Then the bedtime routine, then there's the bed, then there's hopefully sleep. So actually you have to look at the whole thing and try to make sense of it and almost look at it as a kind of pattern. And so one thing flows to another. And I'm not saying that has to be exact all the time, because family life isn't like that. So we have to understand that wee changes can occur, but you have to look at sleep in the context of a whole day. And I think on the advice line, what we try and do is to kind of help a family to understand, okay, where's the wee bit of exercise going to come in within that maybe post-school time? Need a wee bit of fresh air, a wee bit of kind of getting rid of that energy. When's that going to happen? And probably we don't want that at bedtime, we want that earlier on in the afternoon. So we want that, we want kind of good nutrition if possible, good fluid intake, and then a good pattern for indicating that it's sleep time. And that's about that kind of, it's sometimes called sleep hygiene, but it's what it is. It's about what are the indicators that says sleep's coming along, we're getting organised for bedtime. So it's much more complicated and than people probably think, and families do a lot to make that stuff work. But sometimes blips that are not quite right. And I think in the advice and what we try and do is to just help families understand, to untangle what could we maybe look at, what can we kind of help to kind of maybe put in wee patterns that helps the child just to kind of get in that flow of getting ready for bed. Things like anxiety and other issues come into play there as well. I think
it comes back to that thing of maybe preparedness again, and we've talked a lot about that over the last few months. You know, when we were talking with Peter Vermeulen, he's talks about sort of context and being prepared. So it sounds like it's about that. It's about that sort of setting the scene for going to bed. And but I would imagine that again, that's one of the things that probably sounds easier said than done sometimes for some of our families. So is it about sticking with it?
Yeah, I think it sometimes is, because I know that families have the answers to everything because they know their child best, whether it's a child or an adult, they know their child best. And I think from the advice, we really know that when we listen to families, they're able to tell us the information that we need to help them because they know it already. So I think sometimes it is just about helping families just to identify some of the smaller issues that may require to be a wee bit adjusted. Even things like homework. If homework's an issue, which can sometimes be part of the pattern of an evening. So you have maybe a child who is distressed in the evening, and that becomes part of the pattern for sleep time. So there's lots of things that can get in the way of patterns as well. So, and I think we have to look at and start to identify what are the things that we need to get organised or to consider. And we want that pre-bedtime to be relaxing for everybody. Yeah. So we want a pattern where there's distress at that time. So we want parents to feel that they can help the child to kind of settle in, that the parent feels settled. It's got a nice rhythm to it. So maybe things like a wee bedtime story. I know lots of people do that anyway, but for the children we work with, we want it to be an indicator to rest and to peace, and then for sleeping. And the issues come into it as well, like the physical environment. So a bedroom that's really exciting, it's really fun, and it's lots of toys and stuff like that. That room is saying it's playtime. But so we want to have an environment that actually, when it comes to bedtime, that it's maybe there's less toys, maybe the toys are put away at night time, or things like that. So the bedroom is indicating that it's sleep time as opposed to playtime, because we want the visual information to help the child to understand what the expectation is. And in your bedroom, it's time for sleeping. It's all these kind of wee things that it just helps families to kind of unpick a wee bit to help everybody, because it is affecting the whole family.
Yeah, because I think, for a lot of us as parents, when our children go to bed, that's parents' time, isn't it? That's time that families and partners, or maybe, spending time with older siblings, maybe sort of into it. But it's really interesting what you said about sort of, I suppose, setting the scene for sleep. But there might, there might be occasions or particular children who have particular items or things like that make them feel comfortable for sleep. That's part of that sleep routine and pattern, isn't it? But
yes.
maybe identifying what makes a child feel safe, perhaps. Is that
Absolutely, because you want, as parents know their children, so they'll know the things that are relevant to that child. As you say, if it's a comforter or something that the child loves, then you wouldn't take that away, and that's a really important part. And it's supporting families and listening to individual families about their child, because they know their child best. And yeah. The advice sounds really good at kind of helping families go through that stage by stage thing. And I do sleep then we've got going to bed, we've got the settling to sleep, and then we've got the next bit, which is during the night stuff, and then in the morning. So it's a big massive cycle. And so sleep, as I said before, it's quite a complicated thing. But on a positive note, we know that research tells us and experience tells us that with the right support and a wee bit of help with families, that sleep can be supported and it can be remedied, but it's not always easy. But we know that with a wee bit of help, it can. I
think that's a really important message, isn't it? That there won't be a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's about finding out what works for you as a family, what works for your child, and sort of having that the confidence to sort of work, as you say, your child, you know what good rest looks like for you. Not everybody needs 8-9 hours of sleep a day. For some people, shorter periods of sleep are just as restful as longer periods of sleep. So it's about finding what works for you. We've had quite a few sort of comments coming in already, Caroline. So we've got one here from Rona. Welcome, Rona. We're doing great with bedtime for her now 5-year-old, but they've had a baby who's now 17 months old, and the two of them just wind each other up and excite each other before going to bed, which, I personally can relate to that one. And it is, that kind of siblings, particularly when they're sort of quite close in age, and bedtimes might be roughly the sort of same time. Is there sort of any insight or any advice there to try and?
Well, I mean, I think for something like that, I mean, as you're saying, it's good to have that kind of sibling relationship. That's fantastic. But I suppose, once again, when we're thinking about children going to sleep, going to bed, the children will be going to bed at different times because of different ages. So it's about part of the routine would be then to say, well, that's the fun time for the siblings to be together, to have fun. Then there's a time where actually you're saying, well, that child's going to do that thing, another child's going to do something else. So they're in a different pattern then, because their bedtimes may be later or earlier. So we have to then get the child, that individual child, ready, because it's not both children you're getting ready in that situation. You're getting one child. So it's almost like a bit of a kind of dedicated time for that particular child. And then that child is going through the routine for them that suits them and the family. So very much individualising it to that particular child, and it is about kind of in a wee bit kind of separating them a wee bit, and then looking at making that rhythm of that going to bed time just that weekend bit for that particular child. And maybe a wee bit of activity with mum or dad or grandma or something, just that wee bit of activity just before bed, that kind of flow activity that's a bit like just kind of concentrating the mind, getting ready, and then going to bed or brushing your teeth or whatever. So it is, I think, in a way, just giving that individual child the support they need for that wee last bit of going to bed.
Yeah, and I wonder, you mentioned there about kind of flow activities, and we've talked a little bit about in some of the life like that, but those sort of quiet activities that you can sort of do, and obviously, you might need to do a little sort of bit of research into what's maybe right for your child and developmentally where they are, but things from like simple jigsaws, independently, those nice sort of relaxation sort of activities there can be helpful. We've got a sort of comment / question here from Karen, and she's saying her little boy shares a room with her, and I only let him go into the room at bedtime, which I find really useful, as he used to be in there sitting in that room all the time. So I think that goes back to you sort of defining what the space is for. You spoke about, your bedroom is to sleep. but I changed it to only letting him in at bedtime, and most of his toys are in the living room, and so he plays in there. So I think that's really, a really nice sort of piece of advice from Karen about sort of defining where the areas they are.
Yeah, you've got to remember that a bedroom, it might have a bed in it, but if a child's going into a room and visually what they're seeing is loads of toys or lots of exciting stuff, then you've got to imagine that what they're visually seeing first is going to kind of override the important thing. We're thinking, oh, there's the bed's all ready, but the child's thinking, great toys. So we need to think, when you get into the room, what are you seeing? What's the light like? So it is about that kind of visual stuff as well, and it's about what are we trying to tell the child going through a door into a bedroom, that it's actually time for sleep.
That's that for.
And other times it's time for play, but that's a different thing.
Different time. And Rhoda sort of come back here saying she loves the idea of quiet activities. For some, not so much. It might take a little bit of time to sort of routines. And again, I think, when thinking back to some of the conversations that we've had with Peter and other sort of professionals that we've had on these events, saying that, it can take 3 or 4 weeks for a routine to establish itself, for it to become part of what you do. So it, sometimes.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and I think it's quite important as well that when we're looking at sleep, it's sometimes, when we're speaking to families, what we sometimes do is we have to kind of stop for a wee second, and we have to help families say what goes on now, to go through it step by step, and then, okay, what do we need to look at? Because routines are quite big, and sometimes things won't work, sometimes they will work, sometimes children think, I'm not interested in that, sometimes it intrigues them. And wee activities can just be for a minute or two, they don't have to be for 20 minutes. It's just these wee activities these wee steps that can just help to indicate sleep. And it doesn't always work, and I'm not saying for a second we have all the answers, but I think certainly sometimes it is about starting to kind of look at what's going on, and then helping a family. It's like a ball of wool, try to kind of tease out what are bits, and then restarting again. Not that anybody's wrong, sometimes it's quite overwhelming, and if everything, and sleep has such a ripple effect on everybody, and when families are exhausted, it's really hard for them to even think, actually, that's, why would I do that, or I'm to think about that, because it's just too much. And even things like tackling sleep, you want to tackle sleep when you think a family is ready, because you wouldn't want to start a sleep pattern or a sleep counselling or whatever just before Christmas time, because there's so much going on. So you want a family to feel ready to tackle something. I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a comment here from Jojo, and I suppose this maybe sort of moves our conversation on to maybe sort of slightly older children.
Yeah.
So she's asking here around her 11-year-old daughter needs a parent with her every night and won't settle until late.
Yes.
Feels like she's fighting sleep.
Yeah.
Sometimes she won't go up to bed and becomes very upset. We've tried to withdraw, but sometimes she just becomes really distraught, really.
Yes.
And I'm really sorry to read this, because she hates herself. Well, she hates being hurt by herself, and is sometimes scared to be asleep. And as you've said, this is now affecting the whole family. I wonder, it sounds like a really difficult situation and a really difficult scenario for everybody to be in.
And you can actually even see from Jojo's example there how it's not just about sleep. It is quite complicated, and for our daughter, you can see that need for a parent to be there, and as part of the pattern is for her sleep, is that then these things have to happen. Has to be there probably for sleep to happen as well. But you can see how complicated the routines have got, and a parent has become an integral part of that. And it's like a kind of prompt, that person has to be there. But on a positive note, I actually think if the advice then had that inquiry coming in, we could probably work with the family to kind of go through that and to say, when you're ready, let's look at how we can support her daughter to feel comfortable, maybe with mum in a different room or something like that. But it is a process. There's not a quick answer. And when the family are ready, then the family can then work towards the small steps to support her daughter along that kind of pathway to feeling confident, secure, rested, and then for that wee pattern regarding the parent being with her to kind of be looked at, to kind of, so that mum can get, or the parent, you know, so they maybe can be sitting further away from her, and it's that kind of gentle pattern stuff. And you can see from that example, there's not an easy answer, but there can be support, and things can change, but it's quite complicated. And I think I want to reassure families that although it's complicated, I think sometimes people do need a wee bit of help, like from the advice center from Scotland, great helpline as well. A wee bit of support, I think, sometimes is always helpful. I always imagine it's like going with a family down a path, taking the hand and going with them, and when they're ready, they're away. But people just need a wee bit of support. And
absolutely. And I think for some I wonder in this case as well if there's a sense of feeling quite lonely. When you're going, and if you're used to being around lots of people all day, at school, you're with your friends, you come home and your family's there, and then going to bed can be quite lonely for some people. It can feel, particularly if you do have difficulty, maybe switching off and brain sort of settling down, it can, perhaps feel a bit lonely. Or I wonder in this case as well if maybe Jojo's daughter maybe is a bit unsure about where her mum goes after she, when she goes to bed and goes to sleep, where does mum go?
Absolutely. And I think, I know from an experience is that we have to also consider someone's developmental levels, and I think that's a critical factor, because we know that with many of our children and adults and adolescents, we have to take that into consideration. It's a really important part of it to think developmentally, where is your child? And I know that sometimes that's quite different from a chronological age, but it's such an important part when we're looking at sleep. And within the bigger bit of looking at supporting a family, that kind of question is actually quite important. And of things like developmental about nightmares, and when do they naturally come in, understanding. So it is quite an important area. And as you're saying about the well-being of adolescents, we know that on the advice, and we get a lot of inquiries from parents of adolescents as well. It's such
and we just had a comment here from Fiona, who's just joined us and said her son is 17 and newly diagnosed, but he's always struggled with sleep. And I think as well, 17, we do hear a lot of, as you said there, sort of adolescents that are sort of struggling to sleep. That routine sleep routine and sleep hygiene for adolescents and for adults looks very different than it does for children, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think for families, it can sometimes come as a surprise to understand that, when we feel sleepy because of melatonin, because our brain floods of melatonin. But as children come into adolescence, that the time of when that comes into the brain changes. So, that's why children, when they become a wee bit older, they struggle to go to bed early, because actually their body's saying it's too early. So we have to look at those types of things, and that's like a development thing as well. So for older, for young men and young ladies who are maybe in late adolescence, I think if you've got a family that's had a young person that's had persistent sleep issues, they've maybe never had good sleep, and it's not unusual for us to speak to somebody who will say, my daughter or son has never slept well. They've always had difficult sleep patterns, and we understand, obviously, you're not going to fix that immediately, but sometimes untangling that again and looking at it step by step and supporting the family and the young person sometimes as well, because by age they can help us, because often they actually can help us to tell us what some of the issues might be. And like anxiety can be a big one, and families talk about the child might be distressed and have a difficult sleep pattern, maybe on a particular night of the week. And the child has maybe mentioned that they maybe got PE that day or the next day, and sometimes we can actually get wee indicators from the actual child what some of the wee issues may be. So it's anxiety about what's going to be happening, or they stop thinking, and it's just persistently going on and on and on and on. There's lots of kind of wee issues there that can be untangled and supported as well. But often the young person or the child sometimes can actually be really great at telling us what might be going on. And if sometimes listening to that can be really, really helpful as well.
And I think as well, at 17, lots of hormones and, that are starting to sort of come into play. And, that's a huge transition as well, going through diagnosis, as we know, is an extremely, or can be an extremely difficult time for a lot of individuals and a lot of families. And that sort of post-diagnostic sort of process, and I suppose it's appropriate to sort of mention our post-diagnostic support service that we've launched in partnership with a number of organisations across Scotland, and national sort of support, which can help with that transition from post-diagnosis. And I'm sure my colleagues in the marketing team who are manning the Facebook page will post details if anybody's interested in that post-diagnostic support. Which really can be around including sleep.
Yeah, I think you're right, Joanna. And for that young man at 17, that is a post-diagnostic. There's lots of supports that could be there, but I think as part of that, the sleep is absolutely part of that. Absolutely. Yeah. So it could be a overall.
Yeah, we have a comment here from Stacey. She says her little boy is 3 years old. And he gets up at 5:30, sometimes 4:30 every morning, but goes to bed at about 8 o'clock. So, is getting a good period of time asleep. And so she's asking for help. I think, see if I'm picking you up correctly, and do correct me, I suppose sort of lengthening that sleep out to perhaps a more sociable time to get up in the morning. I think Stacey would probably like to get up in the light rather than the dark.
And I think it's quite interesting how many families and how many children will, once they wake up early in the morning, that's because they've aroused, then that's their day started. And if you, once again, it sounds, well, the child just needs to go back to sleep, but it's not really like that. And if you look at the sequence of sleep, or the sleep cycle, we all go to sleep and then we go through a pattern, and we kind of wake up a wee bit naturally, we turn over and we go back to sleep. We do that naturally. But we know that some children with autism, and adults I'm sure as well, what they do is they wake up during these wee cycles. So one of these wee cycles that child might be experiencing is that he's suddenly awake. Now, to that I'm not quite sure, because it'd be interesting to see regarding what else is going on. But to extend that, one thing you could do, which is push the night time a wee bit later, but it is actually a very young child, so I'd be reluctant to do that. It might just be that the child could be just waking just before if he's got in a pattern of waking, say at 4:30. So you rouse the child about 10 minutes before that. That's something, but it might not work for that family. And you can see how individualised it has to be. So I know that as parents wanting a wee bit longer, want the child to sleep a wee bit longer, there could be wee things to do that might aid that, just to get the child settled, just to resettling back, because if the child's waking up, it's a resettling problem then. So what we can do, or an issue, let's say. So what you can do is potentially just rouse them a wee bit just before that, and then they might just turn over and go back to sleep. But if they want to phone it an advice and can have a longer discussion with that, that's not a problem at all.
Stacey, if you would like to drop us an email with your contact details, either Caroline or one of our other community advisors will be in touch with you to talk about that in a little bit more detail with you. and we'll hopefully be able to talk that through with you. Just to kind of finish us up here, we have another comment here from Ola, and she's saying that at the moment that kind of routine, that sleep routine, is about sort of cuddles and reading in bed with her daughter, and she's wondering how she might support a transition away from that, away from that sort of dependency around the cuddles, mum or dad or caregiver being in the bed and reading, and how she might start that transition away.
Well, the parents already told us lots of information there. We can see a whole set of patterns going on there. Mum there, child in bed. So we've already got the patterns. So what mum could maybe do is to just gradually change the patterns just a wee bit. So maybe not sitting exactly next to the child, and maybe just gradually moving away ever so gently every night, just a wee bit. That might not work, but it is just about changing the patterns very, very slightly. So that might work. So eventually, maybe after a few weeks, the mum's maybe not sitting on the bed, maybe sitting in a chair that they've been brought in. So when you're just kind of gradually changing things, you can just not being there one night, but that's probably not going to be potentially effective. You want it to be kind of quite gradual and just to start to change the patterns, but you want it to be that it's not distressing the child. So it's just got to be just a wee bit every night. Just take it as a wee step every night, and every week you do that works, that's the success. And just probably it might help with that. For a parent to contact us, we have a bigger discussion regarding that as well.
Great. And apologies, Jenny, I've been able to bring up your comment now. For some unknown reason it had folded itself in, so I couldn't see all of it. So this really is the last one, Caroline, if we may. So this is coming from Jenny. Jenny is saying she has a really good sleep routine. Her daughter, they've really sort of put time into sort of developing that sleep routine. However, her daughter is suffering from anxiety and now needs mum to be in the bed with her the whole night. Like, she's needing that physical contact with mum. And so throughout lockdown, unfortunately, mum and dad have been separate beds, and she often wakes during the night with nightmares and night terrors. She's finding it difficult to sleep in her own room and only in the spare room, where there's no toys or anything. She's added that as a secondary concept. I wonder if there's a difficult situation, and one that Jenny, if it's reassuring in any way, is not new, if you like.
And you can, once again, you can see that situations are quite complicated, and it brings in lots of relationship issues, because you can see there, it's not just the child, it's mum and dad not being able to have time together, and it's about the child waking up during the night. It's about night terrors or nightmares, whatever one it might be, and you can see the complexity of that situation as well. Once again, I've not got one answer for that, and I think once again it's about speaking to the family and kind of detangling that and saying, okay, where will we start? Because you can only do one thing at a time. You can only do one wee thing at a time, and there's lots of issues going on there, and there's lots of probably motivation to change some of that, and probably the parents want to spend time together. So I think there's lots of things there as well. And you could say about, it's about gradually just distancing yourself from the child in bed, but I think maybe in that scenario there's maybe a wee bit more discussion needs to be had there regarding how to support the family to the next wee step regarding that. And again, that there's not a one thing fits all. If every family is unique, but every parent knows their child best. And I think it's really important that we listen to families, and we listen to how we can help them, and when they want to start with that help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you for all your insight, and I think, seeing from the comments, it's been hugely useful. I've learned a lot through this as well. There are some comments that we haven't been able to get through this afternoon, and so thank you to everybody who's contributed. We will pick all these up individually and come back to you all if we haven't been able to answer your question this afternoon. It might also be worth us mentioning, we do have a Parents and Carers Forum on our Scottish Autism Facebook pages. There's a private group for parents and carers, and might be a good place to continue this conversation, because there is lots of parents coming in and supporting and chatting with each other. So please do feel free to carry on that conversation within that group there. It's left to me as well to just remind you, we have more resources around sleep and getting a good night's sleep on our website. We have resources around, as I say, getting a good night's sleep, what that looks like, and around good sleep routines as well, and details of how to access that have been posted in the comments underneath the event today. It also is time for me to mention we welcome back Peter Vermeulen, who we've had a couple of really great sessions with over the summer. Peter is joining us on Friday the 18th of December, and he's talking about what autism-friendly relaxation looks like. And sometimes that looks very different to what we might expect, and what it might look like for everybody. So that's Peter's event, Autism-Friendly Relaxation, on the 18th of December, so next Friday. We are also, this is sort of a focus on well-being throughout the month of December that we're having here. So we're delighted to have Johnny Drury joining us on a Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning, and also on the Mondays at 7 o'clock in the evening. And he is doing guided mindfulness sessions. Johnny is a mindfulness-based life-enhanced practitioner, get the title right, and his sessions are absolutely brilliant. They're open to everybody. Just, you know, a wee half an hour of relaxation and focus, and I think it goes back to what Caroline was saying about just sort of getting that switching off. So that maybe that Monday at 7 o'clock one might be a good one to sort of use as part of a good sleep routine. But thank you again, Caroline, for joining us. It's been a really insightful event, and I hope everybody watching has been able to find out something useful, and do join us on the next one. Thank you.